1998, Japan. A man sits alone in his apartment when suddenly his television flickers on. The TV shows a grainy image of a small girl wearing a white gown with long black hair. She crawls out of a well in the distance and slowly moves towards the screen. The man watches in morbid curiosity, believing he's safe as the little girl is confined behind the glass of the television, right? But at this moment, the little girl begins slowly, inexplicably crawling out of his television onto his living room floor and continues to pursue him. Towards the end of the 1990s, fear, paranoia and anxiety began to spread around the world. With the rise of the internet and the countdown towards what became known as the Millennium Bug, humanity feared that their own technology could bring about their downfall. This resulted in a new boom of supernatural ghost movies, ones that particularly dealt with technology and its deadly consequences. The first of these hugely successful movies was Ring, a movie that not only influenced this new wave of popular ghost stories, but also sparked a new movement of mainstream Japanese horror movies that terrified audiences around the world. This became known as J-horror. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of the ghost story, and we review Takashi Shimizu's Ju-On and Hideo Nakata's Ring. Welcome back to the Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're joining us for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres across a number of weeks. We are currently in the midst of exploring the evolution of the ghost story, and this is part 13, unlucky for some, in which we are heading over to Japan to explore, as the intro suggested, the incredible world of J-horror. Very, very exciting. Now, we've got loads of movies to cover. We're going to be covering some movies in spoiler-free detail, but we are going to be talking about two movies in particular in absolutely spoilerific detail from beginning to end. That is Ring from 1998 and The Grudge from 2002. So those two movies in particular, I would recommend going and watching before listening to these reviews. FYI, I've had a lot of discussion with my co-host this week as to whether or not the movie is called Ringu or Ring. It's spelt Ringu, but I believe actually the U is supposed to be silent. So for the purpose of this podcast, we will be referring to it as Ring, but we are talking about the Japanese original, not The Ring, which is the American remake, so just bear that in mind. It's quite confusing. But before we get started, here are a few contact details. You can email us. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, that's @evolutionpod, or on Facebook, that's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. And you can also join the discussion group. That's where you can discuss the podcast, the horror genre, anything you like with other fellow listeners. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group, and that can be found on Facebook. And don't forget, you can also subscribe to us now on Letterboxd. That's where you can keep up to date with what movies we're going to be covering over the next few weeks. That list gets updated on a weekly basis, so you can create your own little to-watch list and keep involved in the discussions. Okay, now let me introduce my guest. I'm very, very excited to have her on the podcast. This is the first time she's been on. I've been dying to get her on for a very long time, and she's here discussing one of her favourite and scariest ever horror movies, so a perfect time to introduce her. It is my great pleasure to welcome the brilliant Rosie Fletcher. Welcome, Rosie.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm all right, although you're going to have to forgive my very slightly husky voice. It's freezing cold outside, and I've got a bit of a cold.
Freezing cold outside. Thank you so much for being here. I've sort of made you sort of travel from home into central London in like -5 temperature, whatever it is outside right now. It's pretty horrendous, isn't it?
It's freaking Narnia out there.
Yeah, it really is. Brilliant. So first of all, just for people who don't know anything about you, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I'm currently the movies editor at Digital Spy. But before that, I was at Future Publishing for about 9 years, working on a now defunct magazine, initially called DVD Review, which was a wonderful thing, but closed because nobody wants to read a magazine about a format. And then for about 6 years on Total Film. So yeah, I've been a critic for just over a decade.
Oh my God! So you must have you've got a pretty good movie knowledge then, by the sounds of it.
Well, you'd hope so. Although weirdly, I feel like I don't know whether you find this, Mike, but like you watch so many movies that sometimes one pushes out another one.
Yeah, definitely.
There's only so much capacity.
And it's always one of those things, isn't it? You when you watch movies, for your job, and then somebody just comes up to you and goes, "Oh, what's good right now? What should I go see?" And you just go,
literally no idea what's in the cinema right now.
Absolutely no idea.
Or half the time it's things that I've seen, but I couldn't tell you a thing about them.
Yeah, nothing about them. And or someone will just go, "Oh, what's the last great thing you saw?" Oh, I don't fucking know. Yeah. Are you a horror fan? What's your relationship like with the horror genre?
I am a horror fan, actually, and horror is the reason I even do this job. So that's where I started out. So pre-movie journalism, I was working at a magazine called Which is like the Consumers Association mag.
Yeah.
And for a couple of years, writing horror reviews on the side for this website called Horror Talk, just for fun and for free. Yeah. So yeah, horror is absolutely my heart.
I know Horror Talk. That's still a website?
It is. It's an American site, but it's actually it's really come up. It's a really great site. I'd really recommend it. Don't go and read my old reviews because they were awful. But that was like 10 years ago, so I'm going to forgive myself.
That's awesome. What was the very first horror movie you remember seeing as a kid? Do you remember sort of how you got into horror?
So I have really strong memories of seeing Quatermass in the Pit. Ooh. And I know it's not strictly speaking pure horror because it's sci-fi, of course, as well.
But it kind of is.
But it's really frightening. Yeah. And having watched it again recently, it's really frightening. It's a really frightening film.
And really good. It really holds up.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah. And it was on. I'd been to. Weird story. I'd been to Wimbledon with my dad, who was the teacher, and we'd come back and it was quite late, and my mum was watching it, but it only just started, and she let me stay up, and I don't know exactly how old I would have been, but not very old. Yeah. So more like sort of maybe 9, possibly 10, and it really frightened me, but in a way that was like really exciting.
Yes.
So I was sort of like thinking about it and feeling a bit worried about it, but just really slightly obsessing. And then from there, it was the Omen movies. Which were just amazing, and again I was allowed to watch those probably about 12, 13.
Yes.
And became really obsessed. And then of course it was, as I am of the age of Moviedrome, which was just the best thing ever. So I'd set my video to record the two movies. It was that and then the double bills they used to do, and then come down on a Saturday morning, and instead of watching cartoons, like basically watch Razorback or watch like Videodrome or watch
amazing,
just strange movies as introduced by Alex Cox.
Was it Alex Cox?
It was Alex Cox, and then it was Mark Cousins later.
Yeah, I remember watching it with Mark Cousins, and I got introduced via Moviedrome with Mark Cousins to The Night of the Hunter, which is still one of my kind of favourite sort of top 5.
Genius movie.
I just love it to pieces. I really wish. I mean, I know we have the internet now for stuff like that, but I do kind of miss those days.
I miss it too. And so I started with Alex Cox and then Mark Cousins, but Alex Cox was just so brilliant at kind of telling you what to look for and being really excited about it without being patronising. So it was really nicely curated, and you really felt like you got something out there.
Yeah. You just have that.
I do miss that.
That curation element that you just had on television was so nice. The little introduction and then watching it. Yeah, it was wonderful. But yeah, so what we've been talking. I mean, we talked for a long time, for a big number of weeks, about the slasher genre. Now we're talking about kind of the more supernatural stuff, ghost movies and that kind of thing. I mean, what's your? Are you a fan of these types of movies? These kind of haunted house movies, ghost movies?
Yeah.
That kind of thing?
I am actually, and I would say that's probably my favourite kind of movie. I'm much more keen on the supernatural genre than I am on so stalk and slash. Yeah. Of course there are brilliant ones. Of course there are. Yeah. But I do prefer a good haunting or a good ghost movie.
This is the first time we sort of ventured into J horror, I suppose. Would you say J horror has kind of defining characteristics as a subgenre, or is that just broadly, it's just Japanese horror?
No, I think that's absolutely true. I think because J horror is a particular kind of horror, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's distinct from something like what is the Takashi Miike movie?
Audition,
exactly. Which is obviously a Japanese horror movie, but it isn't the same thing. J horror, obviously started or that particular movement under that name in the 90s, in the late 90s, and then massively hit the West. And so there are particular movies that you would class under that banner, which are kind of defined by, a lot of the time, it's female ghosts, and it is really ghosts, and a real sense of the uncanny. So the two movies we're talking about tonight, I think, that are possibly the best examples of things being off and odd and not necessarily explained, and I think that's quite a sort of a defining characteristic of that. Also, a lot of the time it's about families, and largely speaking, it's bloodless. Although that's not always true. But.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. And also, actually, this is a trait, I suppose, with the ghost sort of subgenre as a whole, but always sort of female protagonists at the centre of them as well, aren't they?
Well, actually, and so these films were in Japan. It was horror was aimed at girls, little kids, or not little kids. Sorry, not little kids. But teenage girls was a big audience for that. So in a way, weirdly, in the US, certainly, and probably in the UK to an extent, in the 80s, it was all like, oh, it's only blokes who watch horror movies, and that isn't at all what it was like in Japan. It was really just like, oh no. So there was a series called Scary True Stories. I don't know whether you saw that. It's a Japanese series of shorts, and I think it started off on TV, but certainly I watched it as a DVD, basically.
Yeah.
They're like these little ghost stories, often involving teenage girls, sort of told as if it's real, sort of reminiscing that kind of, women getting together and saying, "Oh, did you hear what happened to this person? Did you hear that story about?" And they're fantastic, and that's part of, I think, what I loved about J-horror is that it's very female. Actually.
Yeah, it is, and they do have a real look, don't they? Like a kind of colour palette or something almost.
It's also blues and greys, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Yeah,
and of course the iconic, the J-horror girl ghost being this very iconic kind of figure with the long black hair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Long white gown or whatever.
Yeah, I know. It seems funny to think that this was something that became popular in the sort of late 90s. It feels like it's kind of always been with us, kind of ghost.
But it absolutely has. I mean, and in Japan, of course, you had like Kwaidan, and probably pronouncing that wrong. And Ogesi Monogatari as well, and they had some of those themes. It just didn't hit until Ring, basically.
It's
like
true.
Ring was the one where suddenly all the Western audiences were like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, I mean, do you? It's obvious. I'm a bit ignorant, to be honest, to Japanese horror, sort of pre 80s, and I need to go back and watch all of those movies. There's that one called House in the 70s, which I keep being told is crazy but brilliant, and Kwaidan and Onibaba and all these types of movies. Do you think they have a different tradition of sort of ghosts and what ghosts are and that kind of thing?
I think that's absolutely true. I think you'll find that in most cultures, won't you? Like that the kind of myths and legends and particular kinds of tradition are different culturally. And actually, Ring is based on a particular kind of tradition, and of course it's based on a book, but that book was talking about that kind of female vengeful spirit which had already existed in sort of Japanese culture before then.
Ringu, coming to video and DVD March 4th, 2003.
We begin with four teenage girls who are talking, or two teenage girls talking about how one of them was in a cabin on a particular island and watched this very odd videotape, and afterwards got this phone call, and it with an indication that she was going to die in 7 days. And initially it's told like it's a bit of a joke, but she's like scared, and you get a sense of this. And then 7 days later, she and the four others who saw the tape all do die, and the girl who she related the story to is there, witnesses it, and goes crazy.
Yeah.
So then, cut to, basically, our main character, who's a journalist, and she hears about this story about these kids all dying at the same time, and begins to investigate and comes across the video, and this is where our story begins. I don't know whether you want it spoiled or not.
We do spoilers, just so you know, but it's fun.
Sure.
That's great. That's a perfect little setup, exactly. We can talk about these films in depth all the way through to the amazing end moments of these films, so don't worry about that. So I mean, what was your first encounter with this movie?
So I have to confess, basically the whole reason that I'm a film journalist is because of this movie.
Oh my god,
absolutely, 100%. So basically I didn't do any kind of film criticism. I was a journalist, but wasn't doing any film criticism, and it was on TV. It was before it had really hit at all, no one really heard of it. It was on Channel 4. My husband, or he wasn't my husband at the time, but he was like, "Oh, there's a horror movie on, you might want to watch it." And it was really late at night, and we were watching it in bed. I knew nothing about it, had never seen a single J-horror movie or even knew anything about it. And so the structure of the movie is a bit odd. The beginning is really frightening, the middle is kind of procedural, and then the ending is just unbelievably scary.
Is why it's
so frightening
as it is, isn't it? Yeah.
So it finishes, we turn the light out to go to sleep, but I can't sleep because I'm really frightened. wake him up, say, "Can't sleep, I'm frightened," and he says the worst thing ever, which was, "So am I."
Oh,
it was like, ah! So from then I just became basically obsessed with the genre because I needed to make it safe.
Yes.
So I was reading about all the actors, reading about the director, reading about the author, watching other films, just so that I could be like, it's not real, it's not real.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm a little bit obsessed with it, I have to admit.
It's amazing. I had such a similar thing as well. I mean, I was about 12 or 13, I think, and I rented it from a video shop on a video, which somehow feels so much more perfect, doesn't it? On a videotape, and didn't know anything about it. And I just remember that front cover was just the eye.
Yeah.
And there was, I didn't even read a synopsis, but I just remember seeing quotes on the front saying, "This is the scariest," blah, blah, blah. You know, I was like, brilliant. Rented it, and absolutely terrified me from beginning to end. And I also remember, and this is a classic thing, and I've heard other people this has happened to as well, that when it finished, my phone rang. Yeah. Somebody happened to call me, but it was like one of those terrifying moments. So, what was it about this movie that affected you so much? Do you think? Why weren't you able to sleep that night?
I think so. Again. J-horror is now, or became in the 2000s, like ubiquitous, and so I think if you were coming to it now, you wouldn't be able to have that kind of pure experience that we had when we were young.
Yeah.
But I think there's something so uncanny and unnatural and odd about it. So her movements, particularly, are just terrible, and the relentlessness. So of her. Yeah. Coming out. Oh my God!
It's that jerky movement, isn't it?
I was reading about this. So that was it was filmed by a kabuki. Theatre actress moving backwards, and they reversed it to
like
make
the kind of Twin Peaks effect.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
So they did that so that it looked even more unnatural when she's coming towards the screen, and it's so wrong.
That's brilliant. Yeah. It's all that kind of thing, isn't it? It's like you say, it's the uncanny throughout that whole film. It's those little things. There's touches.
Also. So another reason I'm really obsessed by this movie is because it does a really, really clever thing. So like at university I did English and theatre, so I studied theatre for quite a long time. And there's something that theatre does that I prefer film, but there's something that theatre does that film kind of doesn't, and that is the sense that there is actually somebody in a room. So in the same way, So if somebody says, tells you something personally and they're looking at you, even if it's on stage, it's more meaningful than when it's behind a glass screen. Yeah. And Ring. Devious thing that it is, basically what it does is say you are not safe, you think you're protected, and this isn't real because of the glass screen. And when she pushes her fingers through, it's screaming to the audience, do not think this is not real, do not think you are safe. Yeah, absolutely. Really frightening.
Yes, it's so true. Everything about it kind of draws you in and makes you a part of it, doesn't it? And we've been talking about this with movies like, we've been talking about this with, even things like Ghostwatch, the old BBC.
Brilliant.
The way that it acts as in like, oh, you are watching this, you're part of a big seance kind of a feel.
So true.
It has exactly that kind of thing, doesn't it?
And it forces you to watch the whole of the tape as well. Before you know what it is, you've seen it and you're complicit. So it is. It's brilliant in that way of including its audience.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, going back to the very beginning, then, this opening scene. I mean, I remember thinking, and I think when you're young, this film draws you in because, let's be honest, I think there's a lot of the time when you're a young kind of horror fan, you might be put off by the idea of watching a subtitled movie that you've not heard anything about or whatever. But it has what I felt like it has a kind of interesting balance of the kind of East and West in it, doesn't it? That opening scene where you've got two teenage girls and they're chatting and there's a phone call and there's a kind of story of a cabin in the woods and that kind of thing. It felt like it was kind of drawing on US things as well.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think it's like probably appealing to Western audiences to an extent because of that. Although those sorts of traditions, like with Scary True Stories, was around in Japanese cinema. It wasn't that unusual to have like young female protagonists in Japanese movies, but there certainly is. It's a great way to sort of to pull you in that way.
Hook you in.
And I think you're right about the kind of the East meets West thing in a way, because or even the modern and the future, I suppose, the modern and the classic rather, is that it takes this kind of ancient myth, but makes it about technology. Yes. So it is this kind of real mix of those two things.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. We've kind of touched upon that with movies like Poltergeist, even. The way that it kind of the TV is drawn into these kind of ghosts and that kind of old meets new kind of a thing. And it is interesting, like you mentioned, like structurally, it's like scary opener, scary ends, but everything in between is kind of low key, isn't it? In a way.
Yeah, and like so for me, I quite liked that because I was really quite frightened by the beginning. So it's like, I can have a little bit of relax and work out what the story is. But it does still have that like lingering dread all the way through.
Yeah.
And because of the whole time limit, of course, you know, you will die in 7 days. You've got that hanging over you while they solve the mystery. It's
that is a brilliant thing. I think it's just a wonderful hook, isn't it? It's like our main character watches the tape and then she has 7 days to save her own life. Kind of thing. It's just brilliant. It's
really
so
clever.
simple. Yeah. What do you think of that main character then? Of that main female protagonist, Reiko? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think it's Reiko.
So she's interesting. So in the book, it's a guy.
And
they changed the gender, and it's a guy, and he's married and has a daughter. And in this, of course, she is divorced and has a son.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite an interesting choice to make it a woman, and I actually think it was more compelling because of that. So there's lots of sort of discourse about that film and about whether it's sort of punishing her for having a career and following this story and not looking after her child, for example. But then there's extra resonance, I thought. So the bit towards the end when you think she solved it, she goes down the well and she's holding the corpse, and it's these two women, and you know, and obviously Sadako's been horribly abused. That there's a real resonance there when it's two women. So I think I liked her as a protagonist.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. It's interesting that, isn't it? That whole thing about because they do make a thing of this family. It's very cold. Like she and her son don't really have a relationship. The son and the dad don't really have a relationship.
And he's left to.
Yeah, they're all just quite distant with each other, aren't they? And do you agree with that point of view that it's like she's being punished for being a working mother, kind of a thing?
You know, I don't know. I mean, that's something that's discourse that I've read rather than necessarily something that struck me. It didn't strike me at the time I was watching it, but I think there probably is an element of truth in that. And I think within the J-horror at that time, there were quite a few stories about that. So like Dark Water has an element of that too, doesn't it?
Definitely.
And actually The Grudge has an element of that in one of the stories.
Yeah.
And also because at the end of Ring, of course, she basically throws her dad under the bus.
That is brilliant as well. We'll get to that. I loved that. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's certainly an element of isolation, of family discord, basically.
Yeah. It seems to be that they all, and I wonder if this is just more of a cultural Japanese thing or what, or if it's just for this film, but it also seems to be that they all just absolutely believe straight away that this is a genuine thing, that there is a curse, that there is this ghost that is coming for them. You know, there's a lot of American ghost stories that are all about, is it real or is it not? Or there's this kind of central female who thinks it's real and no one believes her, or something like that.
Yeah, and I love that about this. Yeah. Because that's honestly a trope I cannot stand. The incredulous male who, despite all the evidence, and the hysterical woman, despite all the clear evidence, is going, oh no, you're just making it up. Oh, it's all in your head. It's clearly not in her head. But yes, we don't have to. We can cut to the chase with this one. Yeah, which is great in that sense.
Yeah, and it does just go full on kind of, this is what we're getting. It is supernatural. You've got the ex-husband who is just a psychic, and he just is like, you know, there's that moment where he kind of can see what's been going on the, you know, and it has these kind of quite, you know, interesting sort of useful sort of narrative devices where he's able to just suddenly have visions of what happened to Sadako or whatever. But I quite like that about it. It just kind of gets on with it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a film that you necessarily can spend too much time worrying about the plausibility of. No, but it's not for that.
That's not what it is it? It's just like this nice little simple folk story. It's this proper
it is
kind of
absolutely
urban myth
that
type thing.
An urban myth brought up into the kind of modern day and massively thrust into your living room via a TV that basically everybody has. So we're all terrified if the TV flashes on.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely you're going to die if that happens.
I know. I mean, let's talk about that videotape. I mean, what do you think of that tape, that thing that you watch?
It's amazing. And this is the thing. So I'm sure we'll get into this later, but one of the reasons I don't like the remake as much, and I do quite like the remake, but I don't like it as much, is because the videotape makes too much sense in the remake. Whereas in the original,
they try and explain everything, don't they?
They're not really. That was a shame, because part of the genius of the original is you don't know what you're looking at half the time. Like there's a man with a towel on his head and he's pointing, and there's some flies and there's some text and there's and you don't know, you don't understand it at all, and it's deeply unsettling.
Yep.
And it basically it puts you in the movie, doesn't it?
It's wonderful.
It makes you complicit.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I remember first watching it, and again, there is something about back then watching it on a kind of grainy VHS that added to it, and I was like, what the hell am I looking at?
Yeah,
you know?
And I think that was shot on 35mm and grained up to even add to that element of what
am I looking at? And the weird, like you say, the weird text, and you'll get one single subtitle of a word, that will say something. It's just like, what, it's brilliant. It is wonderful. And there's these little moments as well, like they don't. It's not big on jump scares, is it?
No, it's not.
But it does have these moments where she turns off the TV after she first watches it, and then you see Sadako very briefly. And I don't think I even noticed it first time watching it, but rewatching it this week, I really sent a chill down my spine.
Right,
when
and
she
even
thinks she sees her,
like the distorted faces.
Yes,
is off and
that's
wrong
amazing.
and terrifying.
And what do you think then of the remake?
So I did quite like the remake.
Yeah.
Of all those ones, I think it's actually a pretty strong remake. It's
one of
still
the better
scary,
ones.
actually.
Yeah.
And I really like Naomi Watts anyway. I just think she's great.
Me too.
But it doesn't have the same sense of the uncanny. It's sort of misunderstood. There's something lost in translation, basically.
Yeah.
Like trying to go, it's about the horses and there's a horse in the video, and all that stuff was like, no, you don't get what the genius of the original was. It 100%. Is that you don't know what you're watching, and you've been accidentally tricked into watching it.
Yeah.
But when it's explained, it's made safe.
Yes.
Which is the one thing about Ring, that it just isn't safe at all. It's not made safe.
Yeah.
You know, so like when we talk about horror, you've got like safe horror movies and not safe horror movies, if you know what I mean. So for example, Jaws, which is a really great movie, isn't going to give me sleepless nights because I'm not in the ocean.
Yes.
So that's fine. But Ring is the absolute classic example of an unsafe movie.
Yes.
That if someone is not great with horror, I'd really say don't watch it. Like, it's too much. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it is, I mean, it's amazing. It felt like it swept the board in terms of everyone who watched it found it terrifying. Yeah. It wasn't a subjective thing. Everyone was terrified by
You'd have to be
movie.
made of stone not to be scared by that.
Yeah. I feel the same way as you. I didn't hate the remake. I think as far as remakes go, it was quite cool. I like Gore Verbinski's visual style, and it looked nice, but you're right, it was never as scary.
No.
And the scary moments are no way near as scary, but it and I think it did, because I forgot, I think I've actually, even though I watched the original first, I think I've now seen the remake more times than I've seen the original, and I forgot when going back to the original Ring just how little they give you in terms of the backstory of Sadako and all that. Because in my head, I was getting it confused with the remake, where they revisit the islands and they visit the man and the horses and this image is explained by this and all those kind of weird flashbacks where you get, in the remake it's Samara and Samara is in these kind of weird sessions that are being videotaped, like a psychoanalytic thing, and they give you all that stuff, don't they, about her character
and I think, I don't know whether I'm misremembering this, but like certainly I felt watching the original, I felt very sorry for Sadako. Like you feel like she's a victim, although there is this scene where she kills the reporter. She didn't mean to.
No.
And these terrible things happen to her. Whereas I felt like with Samara that they were kind of making her a bit more evil. Yeah. And I sort of felt a bit sad about that in a way.
Yeah, definitely they do, and also they give you the idea of Samara quite early on. Like suddenly the little boy is drawing pictures of her, and that's a classic kind of American ghost story thing, isn't it? It's like the little boy can see her, and who's that friend in the picture, kind of a thing. And actually with Ring, you don't know that Sadako is even a thing.
Well, you don't even know what
she is, or that it's about her until at least 2/3 of the way into it, or we get to the well, or whatever.
So the first deaths, you don't see her.
No.
So you don't know what it is that's going on, which is partly what's so terrifying. Like something's going to happen, and you don't even know what it is that's going to happen.
Yeah. What about those images of the dead bodies that have been killed? I mean, horrible.
Yeah, really horrible. And again, it's that sense of unnaturalness and the uncanny. And I mean, and again, like, so just to digress very briefly, zombie movies, right? I don't find scary.
No.
Because you can hit a zombie with a stick.
Yep.
You cannot hit Sadako with a stick. There's literally nothing you can do. It's coming for you, and it's the inevitability of that.
Yes.
And then the twisted expressions when you don't even necessarily know what happened to these people to cause them to have these looks of abject terror. Yeah, it's just genius.
Yeah, absolutely horrible. And those are images that stayed with me forever. I think that's the thing, like with Ring, the images are burned into your brain, aren't they? Like they are in a videotape. That I couldn't remember all the ins and outs of the story, but I just remembered specific moments, specific images.
It has an atmosphere, doesn't it? And the things that stay with you aren't necessarily the main specifics of the narrative.
No, and actually the narrative, again, that's the thing, the American remake, they made it more about the narrative. You are very much following this procedural journey as Naomi Watts kind of uncovers everything, whereas Ring, I think it's less interested in that.
Yeah, I agree.
More as it is just the atmosphere.
Do you think that's because, like, Verbinski or whoever was worried that Western audiences wouldn't be comfortable with something which is so elliptical and that sort of ambiguous?
Maybe, because they do make a big effort to make everything make sense. So like you say, they explain the images on the tape. They even have that whole scene where when they found the body in the well, they sort of say, oh, the poor girl, she was down there. Imagine how long it must have taken for her to die. And they say, 7 days. And they explain everything, you know, all of nothing is kind of left ambiguous or what the fuck was that about kind of a thing. I wonder if they just worried it would alienate people or something, if it was too weird or too out there. Yeah, completely wrong. The well scene is really different in both versions because, you know, I think in the remake, Naomi Watts gets like knocked on the head by something and just falls into the well and discovers the body. But in the original, there's that long drawn out scene with the water and having to get it, you know, and she's getting more and more kind of hysterical.
And we're getting closer and closer to the deadline, of course. And so it's this just, oh my God. And of course, the relief in the moment where you think, it's all going to be okay. Yeah.
And again, you know, you've got this moment when she's in the well, and in the remake, it's a big loud noise jump scare as the hand comes out. Whereas it happens kind of like slowly and gradually as she grabs it, but so much creepier. I mean, again, you know, what do you think of the way that the main female is portrayed in that original, especially during that scene where she really gets hysterical in that scene when she's kind of shoveling the water out and he has to slap her around the face.
Yeah, a kind of a crazy thing. And again, I wonder if we're, you know, talking about this sort of gender discourse of whether that's sort of a part of that, you know, but I suppose in a way to put her through the ringer like that, well, I think you need that really to have that sense of peril, that she's earned it, that she's earned this kind of redemption, because of course if it was easy then you'd probably know that it was a bait and switch. But because you're like, oh my God, is she going to make it? Oh my God. Oh, it's awful. And so you the final moment where she's holding the body and you think, oh God, you know, she's really earned this redemption, which of course she hasn't.
Yes, and that's it, I think, as well. Because it picks up that momentum so much that you think right now you're watching the climax. You think you're watching that final act.
And I absolutely did when I watched it. Like, I was completely convinced. I had absolutely no concept.
And I think you left with that feeling after that well scene of like, okay, that was a good horror movie.
Yeah.
It was good, you know, but then it's that extra sucker punch that is just...
and of course, and that extra sucker punch is basically the scariest thing I've ever seen, essentially. So to have that traditional climax and then and then give you this thing that you can't even believe what you're watching and you don't think it's going to happen is so smart.
What is it about that end scene, her coming out of the TV, that is just, like you say, one of the scariest images in all of horror cinema, isn't it?
Well, I mean, so partly I think it's because it's completely unexpected, isn't it?
Yeah.
The flicking of the TV back on. Yeah. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something really wrong about that. Yeah. Something very uncomfortable about that. And then I think it is, it's slow, actually.
I think that's what it is.
And it's coming, and you know, well, you don't quite know what's going to happen, but it's completely relentless, and it doesn't. You can't look away. Basically, it lets you cut away. If she's coming closer, and it's sort of like no, and the slowness of the fingers. Oh, and also the fact that her fingernails are sort of bloody and chipped. Horrible. Just that little detail.
It's when she's suddenly in the, and it's the way it's framed, because like you're right, it's the moment when the TV first comes on, it just happens in the background, like you see the guy sat there at a table, and then it just comes on, and the sound design's brilliant in this film as well, because it has that kind of like high pitched noise that TVs used to make, you know, that kind of squeaky noise.
I mean, do we even have snow on TV anymore? I don't know.
Probably not. No.
But that was
it's
definitely
all analog,
a thing
isn't it?
at the time. And her coming, and it really lingers. So even when she's in the room, even when she's walking, crawling on her hands, stands, you still don't know what's going to happen. She stands, her hair's over her face. You still don't know what's going to happen, and then you have that iconic eye shot.
And that's all they give you of her as well. You don't ever see her face.
You don't.
Which is brilliant.
Which I think you do in the remake, don't you?
Absolutely. Ruined that moment for me in the remake. Ruined it.
Fun fact, that eye is not her eye. That is a male crew member, apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's amazing.
So adding to the offness about it, of like, that doesn't really look like
it doesn't fit
a young woman's eye, does it?
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, it's true. And that was what I really disliked about that end scene, because I watched the remake at the cinema and I thought, okay, you know, gearing up for the final moment, hoping to be as scared as I was, and they show you her entire face and it kind of looks CGI'd and too much makeup on it and too over the top demonic kind of a thing. You just think, oh no, completely missed the point.
Yeah, although in a weird way though, like from seeing Ring for the first time, like you can never have that experience again.
No, you can't. Of
so
course
like
you can't.
someone who's like, you know, a young person now who's just getting into horror, isn't allowed, won't ever be able to experience it like that.
Totally, you're
so
right.
even with the remake, it's like, wow.
No, you're right.
Have to do something different, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And like but the slowness and the gradualness and the kind of going against the normal horror conventions is what makes it so brilliant. Like you say, that I heard
but all the way through it does that, doesn't it?
It does
kind of
that
wrong
all the
foots
way
you.
through. Yeah, and it just never kind of falls into the trap of cheap scares at any point or anything. And you know, I was listening to someone talk about it, and they said, you know, there'd be a lot of movies where you'd expect that to have just been a jump scare, a hand suddenly comes out of the TV or something, but it just happens so slowly and gradually.
And you're so right about the sound design, that it's not a crash.
Yes.
It's just
that
the
kind of
unbearable,
increasing
kind of quiet kind of
drone or whatever it is. And even when he kind of starts to stumble back and run, you know, and she's still there just slowly coming at him, it's just it's wonderful.
And and that's really interesting, because she's like, you know, female ghost, young woman, has no weapons, has no physical skills, so in a way, but I think that really works well with it being a man, because there's nothing he can do. No physical strength, no intelligence, nothing could change. And you know, this relentlessness.
Yeah, you can't do anything about it,
which is just super powerful, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
It's just wonderful. And then we learn, obviously, the only thing you can do is pass it on, which is again it's just brilliant. It's just what a wonderful idea. Yeah, because it's like no one is safe then, is it? And again, you've just watched it.
You've just watched it, exactly.
So good.
So it's almost like, I mean, how clever. So it's almost like, right, you've watched it, now you have to get one of your mates to watch it, otherwise you might die.
Yeah. And what was brilliant about that film is, I felt like as well, is that it kind of happened that way with the film. Like it didn't... It felt, for me at least, like it was a word of mouth thing. Friends were saying, you've got to watch this film, you've got to check this out, before it then became this massive thing when all the remakes came out. But in the early days, it was very much like you'd recommend it and pass it on.
That's totally true.
That feel to it, didn't it?
Yeah.
Which was just wonderful. Yeah.
And I think, because that really kickstarted the whole J-horror movement.
Yeah.
And I think I don't think I'm alone in being someone who watched Ring and needed to see other things.
All of them. Yes, all of them.
Yeah.
None of them lived up to Ring for me. But
no, that's true.
All of them I wanted to see. Yeah, it got me into Japanese cinema. And then everything else, you know, like you say, the kind of other Japanese horror that we wouldn't necessarily label J-horror, but Audition, and even even things like Battle Royale and Ichi the Killer and all
of that. You're absolutely right.
Became obsessed with it. Yeah,
it's totally true.
All around that era, wasn't it? It was brilliant.
3年 B 組の皆さん、こんにちは。
はい、こんにちは。
And actually, just briefly, let's talk about the ending, because again, the endings are quite different in the remake and the original. In the remake, they just they discover that to survive you have to make a copy, and it ends with just the little boy goes, so who will we show it to, or what happens when we show it to the next person, and then it just cuts to black.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, you get, don't you? She's just gonna give it to her dad.
All right, Dad, I'm coming over. I've got this great video.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, which is really dark though. It's really
dark.
bleak. Basically, going, I'm going to have to kill my own father to save my child.
Yeah.
You know, just a total perversion of family and this kind of whole isolated thing. You know,
it's amazing. Just take one for the team, Dad. You know.
Yeah,
take this
and
on.
you get the sense that she's. Well, I don't know. Actually, what did you think? Did you think she was going to tell him?
Well, I wonder. Yeah, because it ends with her on the phone to him, doesn't she? Saying, "I want you to do something for me."
Yeah,
so maybe she's going to tell him to pass it on. I don't know, but
or maybe she's. Yeah, I don't know.
She's going to tell him what's coming. Yeah. But it was, again, it just leaves you with a real kind of, it's got a real kind of bleak, a bit more
really
sort
bleak.
of nihilistic than the remake, isn't it, in some way?
Yeah. I mean, it is, in a way, it's like, it's not uncommercial, but it's a very different movie to a lot of the stuff that came out in the West that sticks to these rules. It really deliberately breaks all of those rules, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, it's nearly 20 years old now, crazily. I mean,
Wow.
which is insane. I mean, do you think it still holds up as one of the greats? Would you still recommend this to new audiences?
I think it's a film that everybody needs to see.
Yes.
I do, and I think it's so clever and so cleverly filmed, and also it's so influential that if you are someone who loves horror, you can't not see it.
Yeah.
Like, you can't not see Halloween. But
No.
the trouble with, and I love Halloween, but once you've seen Scream, Halloween isn't the same movie.
No.
And once you've seen all the remakes and you've seen like Scary Movie and all the stupid
all the
tropes that
awful
came
things,
from it,
yeah.
you can't really live Ring in the same way as you
No.
could. I'd still say it holds up though. I mean, it is definitely one of the greats.
It is. And what you hope is that there are still people out there who don't know about it, who haven't heard about it or seen all the parodies and the cliches.
Yeah.
You could watch it completely with no idea what's going to happen and where the story's going to go.
Yeah.
I don't know if those people exist.
No, I've got a couple of nephews, and I'll just try and like get some really young in there.
Exactly, yeah, get them while they're young, exactly. And it's the same, we talked about this with Scream as well. It's like Scream has lost its power, it feels like, even though it was so clever as a kind of parody horror film, Scary Movie kind of ruined it in a way, and took away its power. Yeah, but it's I think it is still amazing, and actually rewatching it, even though I knew what was going to happen, it still got under my skin.
Because it's just the offness of it.
Yeah, it's just the offness. It's the only way to describe it.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe in words what it is about it.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. In the same way that, well, as we've said, that videotape is wrong, but I couldn't tell you what's up with it. But there's something really off about it.
Yeah.
Like just that short little thing. Even watching that again on its own, still doesn't feel okay, even without any kind of narrative.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's amazing how you would do that. So how you would know to select particular sounds and images, cut in a particular way to just produce something that's so purely unnerving.
How do you do that? Yeah, we talked about this when we talked about The Shining, and Danny Lee was saying that it was like, Stanley Kubrick didn't really obey the normal rules of, this is how a scary movie is made and timed and jump scares or whatever, but yet he somehow managed to just, everything tapped into something in your subconscious that made you feel like something was off
That's
or
so
wrong,
right.
or a patterned carpet was somehow scary, or like everything about it was scary somehow. It's like, how do some filmmakers achieve that? David Lynch for me achieves that as well. It's just like, you don't really know why it's making you feel so uncomfortable, but it is.
That's totally right.
It's amazing. What about all the sequels? Did you see them all? There's a Ring 2, a Ring 0, there's
Raisin, and I didn't actually, partly because of the terror of the first one. Although I have to say, I have seen the most recent one, Rings.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's rubbish. It's so bad.
I keep thinking about this story. There's this video that kills you 7 days after you watch it.
Again, it's an American remake. Well, it's a reboot, in fact.
Yes.
And it starts with a really, really interesting idea and then completely ruins it. So the concept at the beginning is that there is this professor who is investigating the phenomenon, and so he has all these students who are paired up or like teamed up, so that what he's trying to do is record somebody for as long as possible, and then they have like a buddy system so that they give it to the next person, and it's all like recorded and no timings and all this kind of stuff, which is actually a really clever idea. And of course they just scrap that and turn it into another stupid origin story, essentially, which is a real shame. But I thought, because that is one of the things that you sort of think when you watch it, if you're being super picky, it's like, now you know that you can just, wouldn't you just keep doing it? Passing it on, and then it would lose its power, because nobody would ever die. And the beginning of Rings starts talking about that and say and implying that the video is not cool with that. The curse is not cool.
Something will change or whatever.
Yes. But sadly, it didn't really pursue that idea. So.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes these things are so much better left on their own because they're so ambiguous and weird. And the more you have to build on them, the more you have to expand the mythology and explain things, don't you?
So Ring 0 obviously is a prequel.
Yes, that's right.
But I don't want to see a prequel. I want it to be perfectly as it is. And I think a lot of the time with horror, actually, like origin stories for horror movies, I can't. I mean, there will be exceptions, of course, but I think they're a bad idea a lot of the time. I really do.
You're totally right. It's like when Rob Zombie's remake of Halloween gave you all that backstory about Michael Myers.
Don't want it.
Yeah.
Hannibal Rising, don't want it.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. You're so right. Yeah, I haven't seen the sequels, to be honest, either, and I'm going to avoid. I just love.
I'm not going there.
It's just so perfect on its own, isn't it? It's so perfect.
Have you seen though? Sadako versus Kayako.
I absolutely have.
Oh my God.
And have you seen it?
Yes, I have.
Let's talk about The Grudge first, and then we'll get
that's a
to
great
that.
idea.
Yeah, hilarious.
It is hilarious.
Yes. So The Grudge. Let's move on to The Grudge.
Yeah.
The Grudge.
Let's start with the plot. Could you give me a little plot rundown of The Grudge? Or
This is
Ju-On,
more,
sorry.
yes. Well, this is more difficult actually because The Grudge is quite complicated. It's sort of 5 different. It's kind of jumps around time zones.
Yes.
It's sort of 5 different focused stories.
Yes.
Essentially, but so the very basic heart of it is it's a haunted house movie, and there is. There's lots of different things going on. Basically, sorry, I'm fumbling this a little bit.
No.
So at the centre of it, there is this one house, and in this house are the ghosts of a little boy called Toshio and a woman called Kayako, and possibly their cat, and I don't know the cat's name. But we don't know why, and we don't know what is going on, and various different people either have been in the house or live in the house.
Yeah.
So we start with a social worker going around to visit an elderly woman.
Yeah.
Before that, it's been a young married couple.
Yeah.
Later, it's a policeman whose daughter is in the house for a brief period. Am I getting this right?
Yeah,
it's quite a complicated
complicated
thing. It jumps about, so you have to pay quite careful attention to know what's going on. Also, just as a thing that I noticed because I watched this again recently. The opening to The Grudge is brilliant, and it has that uncanny stuff going on.
Oh.
So it's got these shots, and it's of the original people, in fact. Although you don't know when you're watching it, that's what it is.
Yes.
And it's weird, and it's off, and you don't know what's going on, and it doesn't actually clear it up until the very, very end of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
quite
you
clever,
have no idea what you're looking at in that first scene, and it's something really nasty and gory, but you're not really sure how. Yeah. It's really
so
weird.
saying, it's bloodless, actually, that's not true. It does have gore at the
Yes,
beginning
and
of
I
this one.
completely forgot that scene existed, and it shocked me because you never expect to see blood or gore or proper murders happening in
totally
J
true.
horror. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, what do you think of this one? How does it compare to Ringu for you? Or Ring, sorry, for you.
So I like The Grudge. I mean, nothing compares to Ring for me. I think it literally is just the greatest movie. But The Grudge is also really manages that creeping dread. I'm rewatching it, so it isn't as powerful now. It can't be. It's not the movie's fault, but it isn't as powerful now. But there are still several scenes in it which were again not okay.
Yeah, brilliant scares.
That CCTV footage is the bit that gets me
Wonderful.
more than anything else than that. When you get to see the blinking eyes. Absolutely terrifying. But it also, it has an unconventional narrative, which I thought was really clever.
Yeah, it does.
Doesn't spoon feed the audience. It's quite difficult to know what's going on in it.
It is. Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that to its kind of it works in its favour and also to its detriment a little bit for me, because I watched it again and I think, taking it as just, a series of scares, it's really good.
Yeah.
And I think there are some really well executed scares that I really get under my skin. But I did find that what's so brilliant about Ring, when you watch them back to back, you just think what's so wonderful about Ring is it's so pure and stripped back.
It's
and
very simple, isn't it?
Just 2 characters making their way through this journey across 7 days. And this is all over the place. Like you say, it jumps back in time, it jumps forward in time. We meet new characters, what feels like every 15, 20 minutes. New stories. It's kind of like episodic almost, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The way it works. So you don't really get a sense of character much.
No, that's totally true.
But you do get these just brilliant set pieces. It's like, now it's the moment with in the CCTV. Now it's the moment in the wardrobe, or now it's the, whatever. And and some of the scares are amazing.
Yeah. I mean, and it's much like it is a pure haunted house movie, essentially. Like the house is kind of the only character that you get to stay with through the whole thing, and because you do obviously find out what's happened to Toshio and Kayako by the end, but they're not really characters. You don't feel terribly sympathetic towards them because you don't know what's going on half the time. it just is quite a confusing story, and I think probably the social worker's character is the only one that you maybe
she kind of comes, she's the kind of constant to. That's right, that's true.
But yes, you're right, it's totally episodic, and it is an odd movie to
unpick.
Yeah.
It's a weird one, isn't it? And actually the house, like you say, you're right, like the house itself is kind of the big character. It's the kind of constant throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And it's quite an unconventional haunted house. It's not like this kind of big gothic looking building.
No, not at all.
It's just kind of on this little street, isn't it? You just wander off the pavement.
On the back alley.
Down this back alley.
Yes.
And it's this very kind of suburban-y sort of house, isn't it?
Yeah. And you do wonder, so like obviously the house is responsible for a lot of disappearances and we understand as the movie goes on actually more and more.
Yes.
And you do sort of think maybe someone would investigate that perhaps a bit earlier rather than just leaving it, there was a little boy lived here but we never found him. But you didn't want to look into that further then.
It's a weird one, but and again I've watched the remake and I didn't think the remake was very good, but the remake is stuck in my mind more, and maybe it's because I've seen it more recently,
because the remake is much more linear. It's really just the one narrative. So you have a character in the remake, basically.
Sarah Michelle Gellar
so it's really it isn't as obviously it's not as good.
And
it has really taken a lot of the nuance out. So it is it is a much more conventional Western haunted house story. With her at the centre. So you don't have all those time travel leaps. It's not as complicated. It's not confusing. It's almost like a not who done it, but you almost what the mystery is. Whereas in the original Grudge, you're not even sure what it is you're supposed to be working out half the time.
No, it's true. And like the way it's kind of similar to Ring is that it almost has this feeling of like being passed on, like each kind of little segment somewhere there's some sort of tenuous link of one character is linked to the next one, and the way that the curse or the grudge or whatever you call this thing kind of travels through
that's absolutely
widens
true.
Its spread from one character to the next
kind of and so particularly interesting I thought was the story to the policeman and his daughter.
Exactly,
because that's quite confusing, and that does a bit of a weird time travel thing.
It does.
Because as far as I understand it, and again it's confusing, so forgive me if I'm wrong about this. But that he lives in the house, tries to burn it down, but is unable to do so. And is killed. But he sees a glimpse of his daughter some years in the future. Is that right?
Is that right?
I don't know.
No, but I'm
because she's like, I saw my dad, but she's a little kid when.
Well, this is
in his arc.
Is she is the daughter the one who's the schoolgirl who's upset in her room and has all the masking tape all over her window? Is that a different character?
No, that Izumi she's called.
Yes.
And but we see Izumi earlier, but it could be not a time travel thing. It could just be he got older, but he's a man and we don't notice. But she's a little girl, so we do notice. So it could be that. But
it is confusing.
But we see, but I don't think that's right, because her mum says, I'm probably just totally off here.
Whoa.
But her mum hadn't told her. She said, so she's in the room having all these problems and stuff, and one of the girl's friends visits and she says, her father used to do that. And did you tell her about that? And it's like, no. So her dad is obviously already dead.
Yes.
While she's a schoolgirl.
Yes.
But she sees her father and he sees her, and there's a sense that she leaves because of this.
They're kind of in this other
maybe
beyond world or something. Because there is a moment. There's her moment where she is then killed, or
later,
and she sees the dad, doesn't she? Is that right?
So what she sees is. So she's not killed by Toshio and Kako. She's killed by the three girls. So she's in the house.
That's
with
right.
Three friends. But she runs away because she sees her dad.
Yes.
And she legs it, and thereby him saving her.
Yes.
But he must be dead at that point.
Yes.
I think.
Yes. I think that was the ghost or vision.
The ghost of her dad.
Yes.
Yeah. And he sees her as well, though, because we see him see her. But then later, she's the three girls who are in the house.
The three schoolgirls in the window that come through.
That's right. Which, as you said, actually is absolutely the kind of idea that it's passing it on. And the house is becoming more and more haunted with every sort of iteration. It's quite clever.
It is clever, and that's the thing. But I think that conversation we just had demonstrates the difference between this and Ring, doesn't it? Just how it is convoluted. And I think, again, you can just kind of let that glaze over a little bit, because some of the scares are so well executed.
That's totally true.
And actually, I was going to say, again, it's the classic kind of trope, I suppose, that in American remakes, it was, I remember being really jumpy, loads of, and the jumps got me. And I remember being really scared by, when they'd pop their, someone would go into the wardrobe or go up into the attic and there'd be the little boy that would make a cat noise and this kind of thing. But again, watching this one again, I just remember how much more sort of slow moving it is, and yet still so much creepier. A moment when a girl would suddenly just open the wardrobe door at the beginning and then look down, and that boy would just be crouched there. And it wouldn't be a kind of jump scare, it would just be a kind of slow, gradual reveal that he's there crouched in this cupboard.
Or the wonderful scene in the lift where she's going down in the lift and he's there on every floor, but it's not focusing on him.
No.
You can just see it.
Yeah.
And she doesn't see it as well. So
yeah. And there were these moments where a girl will kind of sense something is in the house and the camera will just kind of pan or slowly spin round until we're revealed something. Those moments really get me.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then, of course, there's that brilliant... there's the really famous bit when she sort of crawls up under the covers of the bed, which is a great moment, isn't it? I think that's the thing, like, again, a bit like Ring, for me, this has just a series of big, jumpy images.
Yeah.
More than I remember the story. I just remember the bit when she's leaning over the bed, or the bit when she comes up through the covers.
That's so scary.
Yeah.
But all those images, you're absolutely right, they've become part of the iconography of J-horror.
Yeah.
So almost if you haven't seen it, you probably feel like you have.
Yeah.
Because, that bed scene...
Yeah,
classic.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and the CCTV.
That kind of boom. It reminds me a little bit actually of when we talked about things like Halloween, which kind of invented the tropes, but then Friday the 13th took them and oomphed them by about 10 times.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit like that with The Grudge. It's like those the two scary moments in The Ring. You have that about every 10 minutes. In The Grudge, it's like more ghost children, more of this kind of weird, uncanny stuff appearing and popping up every few minutes.
And it isn't. I mean, again, so in The Ring, I love that things aren't explained.
Yeah.
I might have maybe wanted a little bit more explanation for some of the things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the noise that Kayako makes.
Yes.
Not sure what that
is. What is that?
To be honest.
But again, that is so iconic now, isn't it? Everyone remembers that kind of, or whatever it is, that noise that she makes. And that is like, that's the big ending. That's like the big TV ending, isn't it, of The Ring. It's the same thing. She's got her crawling down the stairs, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Love that moment to pieces. Yeah. Really creepy. And again, why is that noise scary? Why does she make that noise?
Why does she make that noise? Why is he mewing like a cat?
Yes, why does he mew like... Yeah, again, horrible.
But I don't really understand what that was about either.
No.
Because we see the old man, who's I think the grandfather possibly of Toshio, playing peekaboo with him, which is actually a really lovely...
That's a brilliant scene.
It's great, and it's really funny as well, because he's like ushering away the human character so that he can play this game with his grandson.
Yes.
And you only see it very briefly reflected in the window.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that's the thing with The Grudge, there is actually some humour to it in a way that there isn't with Ring.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more melodramatic almost as well. I felt like all the performances were a little bit more like cranked up more than Ring.
I think it probably hasn't aged quite as well in that sense. So the scene with the married couple and he's been possessed by the guy and he's like, he might not be my son.
Yeah.
It was quite over the top and something you certainly wouldn't have found in Ring.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But you do get that feeling that actually that film, it's weird because Ring was such a huge success and it was brilliant. But actually in some ways this has a little bit more of like, I would imagine more of a mainstream appeal in some ways, that it has all of these kind of big set pieces and tropes and possessions and it kind of throws everything at you as it goes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it is just a haunted house at the back, first and foremost as well. So and again, all of the sequels, remakes, everything else we've got surrounding this. There's a lot, isn't there?
Absolutely loads. And of course, that wasn't the first version of this. This is a story that I think it's Takashi Shimizu has been making and telling repeatedly, and is, a lot of it is basically the central premise. So when someone dies in the grip of rage, then their spirit will remain or whatever.
Yeah.
That core thing has been told and told and told.
Yeah.
Repeatedly. It's like an absolute obsession, I would argue.
Yeah. This was the Grudge was actually like the third or fourth in this series.
And there were like TV versions.
There were TV versions. I think this was the first theatrical film that that was made. But it's part of this huge sprawling. I haven't seen any of the others. Have you? No. Again, I've kind of avoided them. I really did love the Grudge actually. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I've seen it now. I feel like I've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, I liked it, but I don't think it's as clever as Ring.
It's not.
I think that Ring really is just on a different level in terms of all the different elements of why it works.
Yeah, absolutely is.
But it is super effective and it is really frightening. And again, back, so I think it's 2000, this version of The Grudge. When that came out, we were not fatigued by those images. It was still really, really deeply unsettling. All that stuff.
I think that's why in my head it feels a little bit like that kind of slasher boom of the early 80s. Obviously the films are nothing alike, but the way that it kind of, you got this one and then you got this little sort of 3 or 4 year span of this boom where we got so many of them.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of, and then people got bored of it. That's what it felt like.
You're right, and I think in a way, no disrespect to the movie, but The Grudge is more of the popcorn mainstream version of what Ringu did.
Created. Exactly. Yeah. You're so right. Yeah.
私たちが生き残る道はあれしかない。
So you've seen Sadako versus Kayako.
I have.
What do you think?
I think it's a load better than Rings.
Yeah.
Like, it is nonsense. It is
absolute nonsense.
Utter nonsense. But it was really fun nonsense.
It was kind of, it felt like it was played for laughs almost entirely.
And I think that was the right thing about it. So it really, like, it absolutely trashes a lot of the mythology.
Yeah, it does.
So like, this scene, it's like, oh, it's not in a well anymore, it's a warehouse now. Yeah. Oh, and it's not a week because we can't bother with that. So now it's
3
just
days.
a day.
Yeah,
I think it was 1 day, wasn't it?
Ridiculous.
Or maybe it was 3 days, but it was just like, let's not worry too much about the mythology.
Yeah, it was so funny. And it was a bit like, oh God, they're ruining these wonderful creations a little bit. But it was fun.
It was fun,
I really enjoyed it. And actually, no matter what you do with Sadako, for me, I still found it quite creepy whenever she would appear. You know, that's the thing. Yeah.
And it had that obviously amazing set piece when the two clash.
Amazing.
And weirdly, maybe slightly depressingly, I think that was probably the only thing you can do with those franchises now, that it's become so mainstream and so kind of ubiquitous that like it's almost like eating itself. So then why not go, all right then, well, I want to bring these characters back. Everyone knows this. We don't need to bother explaining all the mythology because we all know that.
Yeah,
you know?
It's exactly. And again, that's kind of why it reminds me. It's like the Freddy versus Jason of that. It's like
Absolutely.
This is what's happened to these franchises.
Yeah, or the Alien versus Predator.
Yeah, they've become this kind of giant thing where we've almost all forgotten what it was that made them so popular at the very beginning in the first place. There are obviously loads of other films to talk about, and I thought there's no point in covering them all in depth because they all are kind of similar and they have similar tropes and traits, really, these J-horrors. But are there any others for you that kind of stuck out as any sort of personal recommendations or favourites?
So Dark Water is one that I really loved.
There's a leak in my bedroom ceiling. I can hear that there's someone running water upstairs.
Did you say upstairs? There hasn't been anyone up there for years.
Dark in the red air, what's the spider out?
And actually, I think the remake is pretty good as well. It's different.
With Jennifer Connelly.
That's right. And I sort of think that partly the reason so Dark Water is about a woman in a house and she's finding hair and black hair. And it's a really sad story in the end.
Yes,
in fact.
It is really sad, yeah.
And it's very much a supernatural story, the original. However, the remake is a bit more ambiguous about whether that is actually happening. And there is sort of a much more of an implication of like a mental decline in the remake. And it's so I kind of respected it for that. So whereas the first one's a horror, the second one is kind of a drama in many ways, and I think they both kind of stand up. So,
but I do remember actually with Dark Water that there's a big bulk of it that feels like it is played out as a drama in a way.
It's not very scary, Dark Water.
It's not very scary apart from one moment, and I won't give it away for this one.
Well, okay, yeah, no.
But I'm sure you know the moment I'm talking about towards the end. Again, it's that the J horror. They do have this incredible, reputation. They just have these amazing end sequences. Yeah. There's one moment at the end that is just a brilliant, really simple piece of like sort of misdirection that really made me leap out of my seat.
But then also there's a scene where she turns the tap on and the hair comes out of it. And that really scared me.
Yeah.
Again, because it's disgusting and it's weird and it's wrong and it's unsettling. And
totally. Pulse as well was another really popular one.
That's a Korean one, and that also talks a lot about technology, the internet particularly. This one, and it's a really sad story. Pulse, it's just
really sad story, and again, it has that kind of, I suppose, a bit like Ring. You like to say technology. It has a kind of feeling of this kind of curse element.
It's an old and new thing, isn't it? It's this ancient curse, but using modern technology and just about loneliness. Really,
yeah. And the thing I remember, I can't remember it very well. It's been a long time since I watched it, but I do remember again. It had that feeling of rather than sort of throwing jump scares at you, it was a lot of kind of really cleverly framed shots where you just see things happening in the background, people stood in the background, these kind of weird uncanny images that stay with you again.
Absolutely.
It's just really brilliant for stuff like that.
Another I believe Korean one, Tale of Two Sisters.
Oh, wonderful.
애들이 집에 내려오고 나서부터 이상해.
It's really frightening.
Wonderful.
That really did scare me quite badly.
Yes.
Again, there are two particular scenes in that. One involving a wardrobe, which meant I had to shut my wardrobe in a funny way afterwards. And one, I don't know if you remember the scene under the sink.
Yes. Yes,
Ugh,
that's
God,
the
that
moment
really
I
scared
remember
me.
the most. Yes, yeah, really wonderful. Yeah, that's a great film. I remember being obsessed with seeing that when I first saw the poster and you see the two little girls and the blood on them and the sort of front
well,
cover.
again, actually, so I mean, I was saying they're bloodless, but that's not true, actually.
Well, yeah, but you do think of them as bloodless, don't you, weirdly?
Yeah.
I absolutely do as well. There is a bit of blood in that, although not much. I think that was more the poster design, wasn't it?
Yeah,
more than anything.
yeah. I mean, that one was such a beautiful looking film.
Yes.
So it's a really great piece of filmmaking. There's a remake of that as well. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes, it's called something...
It's called something else. Is it
Uninvited?
The Uninvited? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's rubbish.
It is rubbish. And I remember watching it and not knowing it was a remake of Tale of Two Sisters. And by about halfway through, I was like, I feel like I've seen this before.
Yeah.
You know, it was. And then I Googled it and I was like, bloody Tale of Two Sisters. Yeah.
Yeah, it totally just like really misunderstands what the brilliance of Tale of Two Sisters is. And again, I'm not going to give a spoiler, but it kind of doesn't entirely work. But it doesn't matter because the film is so gorgeous and frightening, really frightening.
Yes.
That you sort of think, that's a bit of a weird choice, but okay, fine, you know.
It's got much more of this kind of big sort of lush look to it, doesn't it? More colourful, like from what I remember, a little bit more of a sort of bright colour palette than things like Ring.
So like there's the scenes of the wallpaper are really iconic. It's got this very specific, beautiful patterned wallpaper where you have a sense of things moving and being off.
Yeah, maybe that's more of a Korean trope or something because you know it's a little bit like recent movies like The Handmaiden and things like that. It's got that kind of look to it almost.
And Handmaiden is Park Chan-wook.
Yeah.
And he did Thirst, which also has
a
lot of this very beautiful imagery to it.
Yeah, definitely. Much more kind of decadent in a way than movies like Ring, and Grudge.
Yeah, and there's a movie called Acacia, which I believe is Korean as well, and that is just it's also not scary.
Yeah.
But it's really beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous looking.
You trust your eyes. You rely on your senses. You think you're alone, but you'll never be sure again.
And then you've got The Eye as well. That was a really popular Korean one.
Also got remade. Jessica Alba.
Also got remade. As far as I recall, the remake being pretty shit.
Pretty
as
bad.
Well.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, like all of these, I remember that The Eye being, you know, it's sort of 80% kind of creepy, uncovering a mystery, 20% terrifying not jump moments, but terrifying moments.
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't rewatched it, but I sort of remember. I think having seen Ring and Dark Water and The Grudge and Tale of Two Sisters early and being really frightened by them. Later, well, not Dark Water actually, but later, then really just trying to get that back and not being able to. So that The Eye, it's like there's a couple of really good scares, but it isn't really that scary.
No,
overall,
it was diminishing returns because they are so similar in a way.
Yeah.
In the way, obviously, the stories are all very different, but actually the kind of setup of the scares and the way that they're executed and the look of the ghosts, the look of the, whatever you call them, the monsters or the bad guys, are always quite similar, aren't they? Actually,
yeah, that's very true.
And it does. I suppose it did wear thin quite soon. You know, all these films we're talking about felt like they spanned sort of, 5 to 7 years or something.
Yeah, and I mean, and these ones that we're talking about are the ones that are best known and the good ones. But like,
there were loads.
Yeah, and it started to eat at stuff. So like, The Wig is one of them, which is like specifically about the hair. Red Shoes was good. I quite like Red Shoes, but that was kind of a remake of, slightly a remake of the old Powell and Pressburger, but also not a J-horror version.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That sounds quite good.
It was quite good. Yeah, but it was in amongst. It was at a point where they were just churning out so many of these kind of movies that it almost became a bit like, it's The Ring but with hair. It's The Ring but with shoes.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen something so scary that you had to show to someone else? Hey. I want to show you something.
Do you think that, especially Rings last year, and it was such a flop? Do you think
it really was, wasn't it?
Is that kind of the nail in the coffin for these types of movies? Are we going to see more of these types of J-horror movies coming out anymore?
I think probably not. I think J-horror like that particular, not Japanese horror in general, but J horror was a particular time in history. Was huge, and that moment has passed.
Yes,
but that isn't to say that there aren't lots of really interesting movies coming out of Japan, and it's also not to say that its legacy absolutely has continued. Like, so you can still see bits of that. I mean, I watched Ghost Stories relatively recently.
The Andy Nyman film. Yes.
And there are clearly J-horror influences in that, but it's updated and it's taken it and run with it. And I think we're more likely to see the resounding influence of J-horror in horror forever than we are to actually get those stories kind of returning.
I think you're right. You're totally. Do you remember that there was even a film of Silent Hill that came out, and it had a little, it had Samara from The Ring, as the kind of villain in it. Suddenly, all of these movies had those kind of look.
Right, and then actually, like, so post J horror, I think you've probably talked about it on the show already, but a lot of Spanish horror and Mexican horror came out, and there are influences there as well. You do see it's different aesthetics, but that sense of creeping dread,
yes,
definitely. And not really explaining everything, and those kinds of things, started coming to the fore.
Definitely, 100%. And do you think, just briefly, actually, do you think that, like you said, there was a real time there where it was popular? Talking very broadly, it kind of came somewhere between the sort of 90s slasher boom, the sort of Scream and all those types of movies, before we got the kind of Hostel Saw kind of movement that came in the sort of late noughties, and it was kind of there. I mean, what do you think it was about that? Do you think there was a reason for that? Why at that time these types of movies were particularly popular?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, so possibly what you've got is the 90s, which was Scream obviously was a really really big influence. So it's basically slashers and then post slashers.
Yes.
And then everything became terribly ironic, and it became about teen movies, and it was all like Cherry Falls and Valentine's Day and all
being
these things.
Basically funny as well as being,
funny and slick
nudge.
And glossy and a bit and people got quite sick of that, actually. It was like, post-modernity became very boring. And then suddenly out of Japan comes these movies that are genuinely frightening and are nothing like anyone's ever seen before. So I think probably it was a shock to the system. I think people, this happens all the time. I find it so frustrating. It's like, it's the death of the horror movie. And it never, ever is.
No,
it's just a different, of course it does.
Yeah.
But people were bored of not scary horror movies. They were bored of slasher movies, and then they were bored of post-slasher movies. And then suddenly something comes in that scares the living crap out of all of us. And of course it becomes huge, because that's what we've been missing. That's what we'd wanted. And then of course the torture porn movie hits, and a new movement is born.
But it just kind of, it's like the pendulum swings one way to the other, doesn't it? Eventually we got sick of bloodless films about ghost children, and then we got people sawing off their limbs and stuff instead.
And this is the thing. So there's the one question of stuff that's being made, and those films were being made, but they were being made earlier than that in Japan. It's just that we weren't watching them. So in a way, I think it's partly that, if we're talking about for Western audiences, and I think that's what we're talking about particularly, people are starting to seek stuff out that's different. So it's like, I'm done with watching all these films. So it's not that those movies hadn't been made before, because they absolutely had. It's just that the appetite to search them out hadn't been there. Totally. But I think also the other thing that J-horror was great for was actually like really expanding people's desire and appetite for world cinema.
100% agree. That is what did it for me at that age. I absolutely then wanted to seek out everything. Yeah,
and the fear of subtitles was nowhere near. It wasn't off-putting. It was suddenly like, oh my god, these are brilliant. I don't want to watch any more American cinema. I'm basically just obsessed about this.
You're so right. And also, actually, I wonder if inadvertently it sparked the American remake craze that then came around that time too. Suddenly, everything was being remade.
That's very
after
true.
The Ring,
Yeah, that's actually, you're absolutely right about that, because that decade was the height of. But it was a lot of it was 80s movies remakes. But you're right, it was suddenly like,
it was either remaking something foreign or something old.
Exactly.
But an incredible kind of collection of movies there that kind of just like sit on their own in sort of isolation. It's a weird thing.
I mean, they're so fascinating as well, because I mean, The Grudge maybe less so, but a lot of them do talk about like really modern themes, but based on really old-fashioned things. So I think there were some of the first movies that were really like tapping into the fear of new technology. And a movie actually we haven't mentioned yet is One Missed Call.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
Which is great, and of course that's about the terror of the mobile phone, but also about it's got that reality TV element in it.
Yes, it does.
Which is odd and left field and unexpected.
Yeah.
Also remade.
Yeah.
Don't remember the remake actually.
No, I don't.
Have seen it. Don't remember
Me
it.
too. Remember nothing about it.
No, I can't even remember who's in it.
No,
that's bad.
No. There were just so many of them. That's the thing. So many
true.
of them.
But that really tapped into like fear of technology. And the reveal of that was something very odd as well that I hadn't seen. I don't know if I won't spoil it actually.
No. Wonderful. Well, I think I probably know the answer to this question, but if you had to recommend one J-horror for somebody to watch who'd never seen any of these movies before.
Well, it has to be The Ring. Everyone's got to see Ring. I mean,
yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. Wonderful. Rosie, thank you so much for joining me. Just before we go, I ask everyone this, just a couple of last final questions. I mean, first of all, what is your favourite horror movie?
Well, the best horror movie, and I'm not even saying it's my opinion, it is the best horror movie, is definitely the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
High five.
It is the best horror movie.
It is the best horror movie ever made. Yeah.
But can I say it's my favourite? I don't know, because it's not like I've seen it like maybe 4 times.
Yeah.
I don't really want to watch it again. It's brilliant, it's perfect, but it's such an ordeal that I can't enjoy it necessarily.
I agree with everything you just said.
So it is the best one, but maybe The Exorcist, which I can actually enjoy a bit more.
Yeah, which is kind of somehow in a weird. I mean, it's weird to say about The Exorcist, but it feels like a more kind of comfortable, safe, scary movie.
I know, that's so true.
Than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, doesn't it? Yeah. Wonderful. And what about you may have already talked about this, but what is the scariest movie you've ever seen? The scariest experience you've ever had watching a movie?
Well, it is Ring. That is definitely the scariest movie I've ever seen. I mean, if for variation, I personally, I think that Blair Witch is really scary.
Yes.
The original. But in a different way. Like I felt like I was watching people I know die. And so I found it very deeply sort of unsettling. Yeah. And there's a movie called Lake Mungo, which I really loved.
That's
and
brilliant.
Couldn't look at. When you finally understand what's happening and we get to the final scene, I had to cover my eyes because I was like, I can't look.
Yes.
So I thought that was very scary.
Yes. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rosie. And if people just want to find you online, social media, that kind of thing, where can they find you?
Well, so I tweet at Rosie Fletcher is my Twitter handle. And obviously I write for Digital Spy, so, there's plenty of articles up there.
Excellent.
Anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining
me. Thanks a lot.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to my brilliant co-host for this week, Rosie Fletcher. What a wonderful guest Rosie was, and hopefully, if I get my way, she'll be back on the podcast again very soon. So, what did you think of this week's show, and what do you think of J-horror? Does Ring terrify you as much as it did me and Rosie? Get in touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, that's @evolutionpod, or on Facebook, that's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. And don't forget, join the Facebook discussion group and discuss this week's episode with other listeners. You can find that group on Facebook. And don't forget, you can subscribe to us on any major podcast platform, including iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, and anything else. So please do, and if you get a chance, drop us a little rating or review, ideally a 5-star one, and if you do, I will give you a special shout out and a mention on the show. So next week we're going to stay in the sort of late 90s, early noughties for this next pairing. It's going to be 2 movies, both came out around the same time, both caused huge waves around the world, both hugely influential, both became very, very well known for having big, shocking twists at the end. In fact, one of them I think became so famous for its twist that director, M. Night Shyamalan, is still basically thought of as being the director that puts twists at the end of his movies. I am, of course, talking about The Sixth Sense from 1999 and The Others from 2001. 2 fantastic, meaty, interesting movies there to discuss. So joining me to discuss them both is a journalist. He wrote for The Guardian for many years. He was also the host of The Guardian film show. He now works for the BFI, which means he's pretty much my boss. And he's going to be joining me to discuss both The Sixth Sense and The Others. It is the brilliant Henry Barnes. So join me next week for all of this and more on the evolution of horror.